Parliament and Sherpa for G20 and G7 and a former Union Minister. Dr. Josna Suri, Chairperson and Managing Director, Lalit Suri Hospitality Group. Mr. Peter Rimmel, Resident Director of KAS. Pankaj Madan, my colleague Manish Singhal, ladies and gentlemen, welcome for this very unique session of the Reimagine series, which is a FICCI KAS initiative. In the normal course, we would have had this around the table in FICCI, but because of COVID times and perhaps we are having this now in the digital format. There have been two fallouts of it. One is that we have actually got many more people attending because they find it simpler to attend a virtual meeting. And second, the discussions have been interesting, and we've been able to get superb speakers as represented by Shri Suresh Prabhu today. A very warm welcome to all of you. And with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague Manish Singhal to moderate and take forward the discussion. Manish, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon once again. Welcome, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. So just as a quick background, we this Reimagine India series at FICCI, which is basically to draw on vision of eminent parliamentarians like yourselves to understand, especially in this new normal post-COVID, how India needs to relook various aspects of its democracy, of its economy, and of course, economic diplomacy overseas. So we are committed towards our government's vision and its fulfillment. And when we look at India at 75 years, we are also, of course, looking forward to our presidency of the G20 in 2022. And before that, of course, BRICS. And following that, we will be having presidency of SCO. So I'm pleased to also welcome Dr. Josna Suri, past president FICCI, co-chair of FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians and chairperson of Bharat Hotels. FICCI Forum of Parliamentarians, is a track to initiative where we engage with elected representatives across party lines in India and also their counterparts in some of the major trade and investment partner countries of India. And finally, we have Mr. Peter Rimmel, resident representative of KAS, and Mr. Pankaj Madan, again, head program and deputy head of the India office of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Without much ado, may I request Mr. Peter Rimmel to open the session and set the tone for it.
Thank you, Manish. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's special address, and we look at the vision for India after 75 years with our esteemed guest, Sri Suresh Prabhu. It gives me great pride to say that Sri Prabhu is a great friend of Konrad Adenauer Foundation. We have worked together in the past when he was extremely gracious to accept our invitation to head a delegation of prominent Indians to Geneva, Brussels, and Berlin some time ago. At 75 years, modern India has experienced its fair share of crises. The COVID-19 pandemic tests the resolve of people worldwide, perhaps nowhere as severely as at the Indian subcontinent. But Indian civilization harkens back even further than those 75 years, for more than thousands of years. That lends an air of hopeful optimism to the current claim that at the end, India will overcome the virus as it had overcome past struggles. Or would they say in Hindi, chalta hai, if that fits in this situation also? At 75 years old, I want to take a look at 75 and beyond years of relations between India and Germany. And where do we stand at the present and might stand in the future? The years after the Second World War witnessed the rebirth of both our nations. India was able to free itself from the shackles of colonialism, while Germany had to be freed of itself. Diplomatic relations picked up quickly between the two young nations, and it was not before long that Konrad Adenauer, the first German chancellor whose name we bear proudly, welcomed Jawaharlal Nehru to Western Germany in 1956. Eastern Germany too was eager to establish relations with a fellow socialist, but Nehru's interest lay clearly with the West, at least in that instance. Along with diplomatic ties came a renewed economic interest in India. India's industrial growth had been systematically stunted under the colonial rule. The new Republic of India was in a rush to catch up quickly, and it needed foreign expertise for that. Expertise that Germany had and did offer. In the meantime, West Germany's industry greatly profited from Indian orders, as India's coffers allowed for plentiful spending at that time. Adenauer, Nehru, and of course others on both sides showed vision because they understood already in the 50s that an economic partnership between India and Germany could not be built upon the then prevalent model of European colonial exploitation, but only in the spirit of mutual trust and cooperation between equals. And I think in that spirit, the two countries have been working together and continue to do so. Cultural ties developed too, with the Goethe Institute, which promotes German culture and language abroad, operating in India under the name of Max Müller-Bauern, in honor of the influential Indologist of that name. Even our own office in New Delhi has a long history, over 50 years, of promoting Indo-German ties through scholarship and exchanges. But the emerging logic of the Cold War meant that Germany and India found themselves in, let's say, different sides, maybe different blocks or non-aligned blocks, but that has never touched the good relationship Germany and India has continued to enjoy. The end of the Cold War has led to more of a realignment, but still we have not become one another's top policy priority yet. India and Germany, being formal strategic partners, are to this day connected by high-level political, diplomatic, and economic ties. For example, the Indo-German government consultations, where Chancellor Merkel was in India just last year, or our Indo-German business dialogue, what took place yesterday, and the current president of FICCI, Dr. Reddy, was one of the panelists. Especially the government consultations have led to a remarkable surge in mutual agreements in foreign affairs, research, and ecological progress. Since 2001, both countries form a strategic partnership. On the economic side, the trend is encouraging too, though there remains a lot to be addressed still. An Indo-European free trade agreement has still not, I would wish I could say has materialized, still has not materialized, even though talks have been going on for more than a decade. But the trend in all the facets of cooperation is definitely towards more alignment, and the reasons for it are obvious. So if we follow the Indian government saying, let's say the crisis as a time of chances, last week, the German government unveiled its new strategy for the Indo-Pacific. The strategy entails a comprehensive list of relevant topics ranging from security issues to the cultural sphere. So far, Germany's economic and political interests in Asia had been primarily with the Chinese, but the past year has proven to the Western world that Asia is not just China, and China is not a responsible partner. The new German Indo-Pacific policy comes on the heels of the European Union declaring China a strategic competitor in 2019 and is itself a step forward on EU-wide Indo-Pacific strategy. The countries of the Quad have already begun to commendable work of defending the Indo-Pacific against monopolizing forces. Germany will join them in working to ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains free for all nations to conduct their business. In our new strategy, the countries that make up the Quad take center stage as their and our vision make us natural partners, which is especially true when we look at India's Act East policy, which fits our approach as well. Germany and France are currently the only European countries with a policy for that vast and populous region. As such, the European Union is very much interested in our new guidelines as they are another significant step towards a united European policy towards the Indo-Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, after offering you a very short tour through 75 years of Indo-German relations, let me conclude by offering perspectives for the future. We are seguing into an era of renewed ideological conflict. Russia and China often declaim the opposition to their policy would constitute Cold War thinking. Maybe they are right, but maybe we already find ourselves amid a new Cold War between the democratic and the authoritarian world. With pressure to take a side mounting, there is also the opportunity to learn from history instead of repeating it. Germany, France, India, Australia, Europe, and many other countries of the Quad have the unique chance to work together to inhibit this emergence of political blocs that behave aggressively for control of the Indo-Pacific. Together, we can ensure that our mutual vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific, adherence to international law, and a multilateral world order take precedence over the law of the strongest. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Very impactfully. I now request Dr. Joshna Suri to formally welcome Mr. Suresh Prabhu and take the discussion forward. Dr. Suri.
Thank you, Manish. Suresh Prabhuji, Peter, all other participants of the webinar, my colleagues from FICCI, namaskar, and a very, very warm welcome to the Reimagine India series. This is a bipartisan forum which hosts leaders across party lines to share their ideas for India's greater glory. Just a little bit of a background about this forum. This forum of parliamentarians was initiated by FICCI in the year 2000 as a track 2 platform for MPs to discuss important issues of national as well as global relevance. It went into a hiatus, and I am very pleased to share that during my presidency of FICCI in 2015, I resurrected this forum as a voice for parliamentarians in the world's largest democracy. Shri Bhupender Yadav, Rajya Sabha MP and National General Secretary of BJP, is the chair of the forum, and Harsh Neotia is my very capable co-chair. This forum is clearly very close to my heart and has witnessed continuous interaction with Indian MPs. Some of them, we've had ministers, we've had Poonam Mahajan, we've had Dr. Shashi Tharoor, we've had Sri Derek O'Brien, and recently we had Sri Gaurav Gogoi, who actually spoke on this forum, and it was very invigorating and very enlightening to hear of them, to hear all of them. This forum also has another interaction that it does with its peer across the world, and we've had several interactions with people from UK, from Germany, from US, etc. Now I, with great pleasure, introduce our speaker for today. Shri Suresh Prabhu was declared the best member of parliament in the 13th Lok Sabha and has several accolades to his credit, including the Gaud Saraswat Brahmin Samaj Maharatna Award. His exemplary role as Union Minister for Industry, Environment and Forests, Fertilizer and Chemicals, Power, Heavy Industry and Public Enterprises is noteworthy. He's got a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. As the Union Minister for Power, he introduced major reforms in India's power sector. Currently, he is the Prime Minister Sherpa to G7 and with G20. He shapes India's agenda, engaging with global leaders. Sri Prabhu is completely committed to several development and environmental causes. He chairs international forums such as Asia Energy Foundation, South Asia Chair of Global Water Partnership, Global Foundation of Farmers, President of World Forum of Global Governance, member of UN Commission for Biodiversity and Land Use Change, and is on the Global Advisory Council for the World Economic Forum. With this massive disruption that has been caused by this pandemic, major economies of the world are struggling to revive themselves. Mr. Prabhu, we would like to hear from you how you feel India will regain its stature of one of the fastest growing economies of the world. And with India entering its 75th year, which also coincides with India's G20 presidency, how will things pan out in the near future? Once again, I thank you for joining us, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, and over to you now to share your views and thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Josna, for not only for this introduction, but for inviting me to participate in this program. And as you said, this Forum of Parliamentarian, when it was getting set up, when Dr. Amit Mitra was Secretary General, and there was a person called Ramesh Chandran who used to be running this forum. And I must say that I was like one of the founding members of Parliament of that. And I had been leading many delegations to different parts of the world, as well as participating in others. But I'm really very happy that I'm re-inviting with my old alumni or alma mater, I would call it, and therefore I'm very happy to be here again and to meet with you. Also, thank you for Peter and Mr. Madan for being part of this very interesting program. As you know, this is a great organization, and I'm very happy that Peter gave a very elaborate background of India-German relationship, as well as the role of these great foundations, which actually is a very unique feature of German democracy, that each political party has a political foundation. It is funded from public money, but they can never participate in electioneering. They can, of course, promote the ideology of a political party, but they have to be away from the electioneering because it's a public funding. And therefore, this is a very unique feature, which actually, I would say that these foundations are really the foundation of German democracy. And particularly, the foundation that Peter heads in India is a foundation which actually supports the CDU ideology, the party which is in power, Chancellor Merkel's party, and therefore I'm very happy that they are also associated with this. So FICCI as a very premier institution of the business, as well as the other side is the German foundation, which actually works together. And I'm very happy that you are invited to speak on very interesting topic. And when you mention India at 75, I'm reminded of another similar initiative by CIA, which actually has an initiative called India at 75. In fact, I was also on the board of that organization, and therefore I'm very happy that CIA started it. You are also taking it forward. And Mr. C.K. Prahlad, whose idea was this when India was completing 60 years, he said, why not talk about India at 75? And therefore, this is a very interesting idea. And actually, India at 75 is a very important milestone for India. As you know, while I come to this point that you mentioned, and I will speak about that, about future and other things. Look at our journey of 75 years. It's a very remarkable journey. If you look around a neighborhood where we reached a very important milestone, close to $3 trillion economy, which of course now we have slipped back a bit thanks to Corona. As all the world economies are contracted, so is our economy is contracted. But our principal objective at that time was to save lives and to ensure that we get ready for facing the pandemic. So rightly so, we had to cut down the economic activity to avoid in-person contact. Of course, there are huge negative impact of that on many sectors, particularly the sector that you so ably chair. The sector hospitality industry is in real challenging shape worldwide, and so is in India. And also, incidentally, this hospitality sector is a sector in tourism, hospitality, and all that put together, travel, are the largest employer. And they are the backbone of the service sector of India. And the service sector, in turn, is almost 60% of the GDP of India. So, service sector runs India's economy, and tourism, travel, hospitality put together runs service sector. So such an important aspect of the economy has been affected. So now I'm sure this will turn out, but in last 75 years, we could reach a very important milestone. Economic output is reaching close to that $3 trillion mark, and hoping to double it in the next few years. That I'm sure the number of years now it will take will be more than what we thought earlier, but will definitely be there. And we achieved this important milestone through democracy. Therefore, I was saying, if you look around neighborhood, achieving economic progress through democratic institutions is in itself a great achievement. And by respecting institutions, respecting certain traditions, norms that were laid down by our founding fathers of Constitution, and therefore this is a remarkable journey. We have achieved a lot, but there is much more to be achieved. We have certainly be proud of our past achievement, but also should be conscious about your unfulfilled obligations and responsibilities toward the citizens of India. And therefore, we have to work together. So, Prime Minister, sometime back, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had talked about New India with the same idea that we could achieve something, but what needs to be achieved more, let it be part of the vision for New India, and let us try to achieve it in a shortest possible time. And therefore, this was the idea. Now, coming to the past journey, there's a very interesting book which was written by some, I forget the name of the author now, I read it long time back, that he had very interestingly narrated that the first general election in India took place in 1952. 5 years after we became independent, we had a first general election. And he had summarized that in 52, how people used to come to vote. Many of them were not even wearing the footwear, they were coming walking barefoot. Then they started coming on cycles. Then they started coming on bullock carts. Then they started coming on tractors. They started coming in cars. So this has been a very interesting, remarkable journey of transformation of rural India, overall India. And at the same time, we have to face with another challenging issue of population explosion, which happened during these last 75 years. That we have increased the number of people living in our country to such an extent that per capita availability of natural resources have been put under severe stress, whether it is land, because we are only 2.2% of the land, or whether it is water, because we are only 4% of the water, or the forest, or even other natural resources have been put under severe stress. And therefore, population, we have become almost number one in number of people that we have, because the last census came out with number, and now everybody estimates that we could be 1.4 to 1.4 billion people. So we actually may have become number one in population, but has put severe stress as a result of that on so many of our scarce natural resources. So that is one of the challenge which we have to deal with as we go along in future, how to manage economic growth without compromising with our natural resources. At the same time, number of people is an asset, but managing large population is a challenge. And particularly today, we can be very proud of the fact that we are a young nation, because more than 65% of the people are below the age of 35. But as we go along, all those below 35 are going to be also going to age. And there is going to be a time when people in future will have to deal with challenges of aging society, as other countries are facing already. So we have to be conscious that number of people is an asset, but over a period of time could become a big challenge to manage because of age, as well as because of the sheer numbers. So therefore, this is another important aspect that though we have covered a lot of ground in last 75 years, this is going to be a major challenge for future as we go along. Other interesting aspect of last 25 years, and I was mentioning the first election when it took place. People had to go from village to village, campaigning, telling people about it. The election symbol, even today there is an election symbol. But that time people were identified not candidates but election symbol only. Now, in the last, particularly last decade or so, a huge transformation and explosion of information has created information availability to the citizens at a scale which is unimaginable. Sometimes it's a problem that you are bombarded with so much of information. You open your mobile and you get hundreds of messages. Many of them you don't want to read, but you cannot avoid it because they are just being sent to you from WhatsApp group, what group, not group, and all of that you have to face the reality. But as a result of that, one is a explosion of information. But that has put another challenge for all of us, and that's what we're going to face in future. Information to citizen is a good idea, but information's authenticity, information's reliability is going to be another issue that we'll have to face in future. As we are seeing today, that sometimes morphed image of a person can be displayed on your cell phone, and then we'll get completely misled by that. You may say, how can it be happening? I know this person, but he seems to be a person with a different attitude now. I can see him on my mobile phone differently. So information, reliability, how to judge it is going to be a major problem of future. And not just for India, this is for the whole world. And I think we have to therefore deal with this very important issue in future. I'm sure Peter will have to deal with it in Germany and his other colleagues in Europe, in US, all over the world will have to deal with this problem. And that poses, one is a problem of authenticity, but that also has created another very important challenge for the democracy. Not challenge, I would say, but challenge, but also a very positive challenge. Because now people know the lifestyles, the way people live in other parts of the world, and they are expecting that I must have the same opportunity. In Mumbai and Delhi, if people are living in one way, why would people in a village in Bihar or UP feel I should be denied of it? And people in Mumbai would feel if somebody living like this in New York, London, or in Berlin, why should I not get the same opportunity in my own city? So this again is going to put a tremendous challenge for democracy because we'll have to fulfill the aspirations of the people on a scale which is mind-boggling, unimaginable. Always, like Josna would be doing it as a chairperson of her own company. Managing expectations is very important. She has to manage expectations of her employees, manage expectations of her shareholders, manage expectations of her other stakeholders. So managing expectations is a very important aspect. Politicians now will have to manage the expectations of society at large on a completely different level. Because as I said, expectation is a phenomena which arises out of some kind of information. And now information coming to such a level from different parts of the world, some real, some are not so real, but still expectation will rise. So managing that is going to be an extremely important issue, which is going to put tremendous stress again on the institutions, which have to deliver on those expectations, whether it is a parliament, whether it is executive branch of the government, that's the government itself, the bureaucracy and the ministers and others, or even judiciary, because people will expect far more from the judiciary than what they're expecting today. And we're already seeing that people are challenging and questioning the judiciary far more than they did in the past, because they feel it's also an important element of the state. Executive is important, judiciary is important, and so is the legislature. So I think that is going to be putting tremendous stress on these people. The other aspect, as we always call it, the fourth estate, which is the media. And we had a traditional media. When Mahatma Gandhi talked about freedom for the country, the only way he could communicate with the people was through his speeches. And how many people could go and attend his speeches because there was hardly any roads. There was railways was not so well entrenched as it is today. There was hardly any air service, and therefore the only way people could either go close by, and Gandhiji wherever he could go, he could communicate, or limited way radio, limited. Even having radio was a luxury. In fact, I remember when I was growing up in school and college, we used to listen to cricket match only through commentary on radio because there was hardly any TV. And now that is some 50, 40, 40, 50 years ago. You can imagine about almost 80, 90 years ago, 100 years ago, there's hardly any TV. So the only way the communication could happen was a very limited way. But that is how it was. And therefore, limited channels of communication. And today, there are probably unimaginable channels of information. And that is going to put stresses on media, the fourth estate of the world. Because what used to first, newspapers will come once in a morning. So you had almost 24 hours to understand. Then came TV, which are 24/7. And now it has come even before TV. You can get it on your pep, what is happening. And that is going to put a tremendous pressure on the other aspect of the future state. And that is not, it is really a state, but future aspect of our society, which is media. How is going to work with that? So all of that put together, in 75 years, what we achieved, we'll have to strengthen, we'll have to consolidate, but we'll have to do that with an ambition of reaching a much better quality of life in future with keeping these challenges in mind. Now, as Jyotsna asked me to talk about, is an issue related to our role in the world, how economy will come out. In fact, one thing we must accept as a reality, that there are very interesting two forces are operating at the same time in the world. Two forces. One, countries are becoming inward. There is so much of nationalist forces which are coming to fore all over the world. If you really look at it, any part of the world, you will feel that countries are insisting, the people are insisting that there must be a focus more and more on their own people than going and doing this. In fact, if you look at it, the last presidency election in 2016 campaign, there's always a thrust when the present president was saying that I would like to deal with my problem rather than playing with a world problem. Now, if you go to Europe, you'll find the same phenomena. And it's the same true for more or less all countries in the world. That is a new so-called nationalist forces which are coming to fore, wanting their governments to take care of their own people, their own challenges, rather than going and dealing with this. On the other hand, these are the other forces that we had a globalization of last several years. In fact, the globalization, there was no globalization, probably there won't be a pandemic today. If because it started in China and it has now spread all over the world, almost more than 200, because that is what WHO tracks, more than 200 countries or geographies, principalities or small territories are all suffering the ill effect of a pandemic. But that happened because we are interconnected. But this particular phenomena of interconnectivity, what we can call it as globalization, has also resulted in huge economic benefits. Like, for example, Jyotsna runs this business of hospitality. Her tourists, she will be very happy to receive tourists from all parts of the world. And why? Not just for her own business. That's obviously her primary purpose. But in the process of doing that, she can create jobs for millions of people in India. Because when a foreign tourist comes and is going to spend $300, $400 a night in India on in the premises of hotel or outside when he goes out on excursion, all of that is going to add to economic value. So globalization has helped to create a lot of benefits. But as I said, but on the other hand, there is this new tendencies growing. And globalization's other important iconic value of that globalization is the supply chains. In fact, global supply chain, not just in terms of manufacturing, but even in services. Even in agriculture, the global supply chains and global value chains have emerged. They are interdependent. They are interconnected. They are ones who actually have helped global economy to grow. It has helped consumers of the world to benefit because they get the best value for their money because they get the best product anywhere in the world. Like for example, if there are no global value chain or supply chain, the mobile phone that we buy today for say $500, for example, would cost you probably 4 or 5 times of that because the global supply chain is bringing together the best available components, best available assembly price, best available marketing avenues, and because of the supply chain and because of this marketing network, because the same mobile phone is sold in billion and not in million, the price comes down. So benefit of that has also accrued to the citizens of the world, has also resulted into making innovation. Because if the scale is not large, innovation won't happen because you have to ultimately amortize the cost of innovation. And therefore, this is another interesting phenomena that we'll have to deal with in future. That on one hand, we have a continuing phenomena of globalization others. On the other hand, there are challenges because of these national forces coming to fore. So I think we'll have to deal with that as we go along. And to answer to this, if we can marry both effectively, intelligently, will be a solution to a higher growth trajectory. So India's Prime Minister's idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat can be seen in that perspective. We have to link to rest of the world, which Prime Minister always highlights. At the same time, make sure in such a way that our local population, local business, local and individual also benefit, not necessarily at the expense of other countries, but by complementing with each other's competence and capabilities. And that is what something which we'll have to do in future. Other aspect of going forward, and that's what Josna asked me to talk about, is economic development. I think we accepted a form for global governance. And Peter, I'm sure he agrees with me on this. I'm sure if all sensible people should agree on this, is that the platform for global governance should be multilateralism. It cannot be that I decide is my way or no way. It cannot be like that. It has to be your way, my way. Let us find out a common way and let's work together. And the multilateralism is based on democracy, openness, clarity of the rules, rule-based organization. I think we will have to move in future on strong platform of multilateralism. I think Germany and India, we share the same perception. And so is Peter and Suresh. Both we agree on this. So I think we must work on multilateralism very effectively. That should be the future. That should be the guiding principle. And I think we'll have to work on that very effectively. Another interesting point that is going to come is that multilateralism for global governance, but democracy for national governance and local governance has to happen. We'll have to have a complete, unstinted commitment to democracy at all levels. And therefore, we'll have to work on that. We'll have to decide. I think I'm running out of time because I was just speaking without any note. I was just thinking about it when Josna said something, Peter said something. I'm just trying to react to that. I'm not deliberately talking about bilateral relations with Germany and India, which are very close. Incidentally, Peter, I was also the chairman of these FICCIs, Indo-German Parliamentary Forum, for a long time. And Peter knows, but probably Josna doesn't know because Josna knows me as a politician. So thinks politician means I must be illiterate because politician normally may. But I'm doing one of my PhD in Germany on climate change. So I think I'm, I'm also thinking about that. But the role as I was saying about, is not deliberately talking about bilateral relationship, but just talk about 2, 3 final points and I will start. The role. One of the role is, I said, democracy is important. Then comes the role of the members of parliament. In fact, I have been in the government with 10 different cabinet positions. This is my 6th term in the parliament. And of course, I've been first time 25 years ago, I became minister in Atalji's cabinet, 6 cabinet position under him, and now 4 under Modi ji. I personally feel I've seen both roles as minister as well as member of parliament. I see in a role as in opposition or in the ruling party. I personally feel that members of parliament can play a far more effective role, not just in India, all over the world. And I know members of parliament in Bundestag, for example, in Germany. I think we must have a far more responsibilities entrusted on members of parliament of the world. Incidentally, this is ahead of time. I was one of the founding person of e-parliament, electronic parliament of the world. The idea was too ahead of its time. We thought, why not bring all the members of parliament and connect them through electronically? I mean, this is about 20 years ago we were talking about it. It is still there, and now it is called as climate parliament, but this was the idea. And I think that parliamentarians of the world, particularly even in India, can play a far more effective role in the governance of the country. First, they represent the people directly, they are elected by the people. But more importantly, they are the lawmakers, they are the policymakers, but they also have direct background of understanding the ground level problems. So I think we'll have to find out a way of increasing the role. In fact, I've written on this in when the Speaker of Parliament at that time, when I was in Lok Sabha 4 times, when I was in Lok Sabha, then Speaker Mr. P.S. Sangma had asked me to write an article about role of members of parliament. So I written that it is part of a process and which will be there in the book. But that is very important role. Other role is of the civil society organizations. I think that is going to be increasing even more because when you talk about civil society, it is all non-government actors, non-state actors. They are very important. So FICCI is of course one of the civil society organizations. But I'm talking about even more such organizations, not just business organizations, but others will play a far effective role in promoting democracy. Because when it's a democracy, it's will of people. And the will of people will get manifested through various forms, through various organizations. And therefore, we'll have to, how to co-opt them, how to take them on board to run the country's governance is going to be a very important thing. And not only in India, all over the world. In fact, I know, and I'll come to this last point. You talked about G20, I'll mention it. But even in G20 and even in G7, incidentally, G7, India is not a formal member, but Prime Minister Modi was invited for the last G7 session, which happened in Biarritz in France, and I was there to assist the Prime Minister with him. And now President Trump has invited India because current presidency of G7 lies with US, and we'll be going there after the election in December. But even G7 and G20, we have a very important interaction with the civil society. In fact, when India will hold it, we'll also have that. But point is, in global governance, we have to take them on board and how to do that. And then the role of business is going to be very, very important. When Josna asked me about development of India, you cannot develop India without developing business of India. And business of India cannot be developed by government of the country. It has to be developed by the business people. They are the entrepreneurs. We have to support them. We have to understand their concerns. We have to make their life easier, and we have to make it better. In fact, I was just gone to UAE for some, just the non-Asian Indians had invited me to speak, and then I called on the Prime Minister, the chairman of the Presidential Affairs of UAE, and he was asking me, what do you think private sector can do? I said, private sector in India is very vibrant, and we have to make them grow. So India's future growth economically will depend upon growth of private sector of India. New startups, old businesses, service sector, agriculture, manufacturing, all of that we have to contribute significantly. If Josna can add 10 more properties, I think this can create probably another 10, further 20,000 jobs. It can attract more tourists coming in. We don't understand. If tourists come to India more, they will eat chicken, for example. So where will chicken be produced? Not by Sushma in her hotel. She can serve chicken in hotel, but she cannot make chicken in hotel. It has to be some in the farm. Some farmers will do it. The vegetables, I'm a vegetarian, so she will not give me chicken, I'm sure. But vegetables cannot be grown in hotel premises. It will be grown in some farm and will be served in your in the restaurant. But so more tourists coming in, we may create jobs for even income for farmers, for transporting those vegetables or chicken and the eggs from the farm to the place where it's going to be served. We'll also have transportation opportunities. When tourists go and looks at some interesting places, and there are in India, there are many more like this, they'll be spending there, and that will add value to and money, bring money. So I think business in India will have a huge scope and role to play in the future of the country. And my last point is G20. India would be hosting G20, and that is exactly as the Prime Minister Modi wanted it, that we'll be hosting it, coinciding it with India completing 75 years of independence. So we'll be hosting it in 2022. Of course, India becomes part of Troika in next few weeks, actually, along with Saudi Arabia, Italy, and India. And then India will continue to be Troika along with Italy, India, and Indonesia when we hand over to Indonesia. So I think we'll continue to be playing a very important role for the next 3 years into the G20 process. Of course, in 2022, we'll be hosting it, but we'll be part of a very important global system of running the G20 activities in the next 3 years' time. So we are creating a separate secretariat in India. In fact, Prime Minister Modi has that vision. So he had already made a provision in the budget of more than 100 crores to prepare for the 22 summit. Way back, that budget provision is for 20. So just imagine 2 years in advance, we are creating. So we are creating a secretariat. We'll be creating a system to look into all these issues. And therefore, I think G20 will be an opportunity for India to engage with the rest of the world more effectively through a democratic process, through element of governance that I just mentioned all this. We'll be talking about a lot of issues that we like to discuss in G20 when India will be the president, and we like to take it forward. So I think this is a very good initiative. Reimagining India. I think that is what your title, Reimagining
Yes.
India. So I think
Yes.
what is important is rather than calling Reimagining India, because we cannot reimagine India. India is not an imagination, but India is a reality. You can only reimagine the way India should be run in the next few years' time. India is an idea, India is a civilization, India has a culture, India has tradition. So all of that is a reality. What we can do is to how to build on all this and make India a better place. That is, in my opinion, is the whole concept of reimagining India. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here. I think I will be very committed to the process of engaging with all the stakeholders globally within the country to make India a really a country which all the rest of the world should admire and Indians should love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As always, very absorbing address, and of course, you've taken us through India's history since independence, right up till your vision, and actually amazing the way you eloquently covered the global economy, global governance, lawmaking, civil society, and all aspects. In fact, your perspective on globalization and multilateralism is something very dear to us, and you very nicely explained the convergence with our motto of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which I think needs that sort of explanation because a lot of countries are looking at it in a different way. The convergence between globalization and self-reliance is very clear there. So that way, we are honored to have you as our Sherpa at G20 and G7. In fact, FICCI itself has created a document where we made some suggestions, and we've been discussing those suggestions with MEA and DA and MOC, and probably we'll look forward to an opportunity of drawing again some time from you to present this proposal to you. So I'm not sure whether you have time for any questions, but we have, Ambassador of
I will
Vietnam.
leave. Now you can
Okay.
ask me one or two questions. You can take. Let's take one or two questions.
Okay, we have His Excellency Ong from Embassy of Myanmar. If he would like to ask a question. Okay, I think, but I have something on the chat box, sir, which I can probably share with you. Actually, at G20 Extraordinary Virtual Leaders Summit on 26th March, Honorable PM had emphasized on human-centric globalization and collective welfare, and he rightly pointed out that it should be much, much beyond individual interest. Now, how do we plan to weave this vision of Prime Minister, especially when we look at our G20 agenda in 2022?
So, G20 agenda have a very two important characteristic. One is that every presidency brings their own priorities on table. Like Saudis have put something on the table. Uh, Before that, Japan had put something on the table. So this is a continuation of the priorities which were articulated earlier by the earlier presidency. So we'll continue with that. And of
Right.
course, therefore, we're not going to challenge that, but we'll also bring in our own priorities. That's a prerogative of the presidency. So we'll bring our own priorities, which we'll articulate soon. And therefore, we'll not discard anything that has been said in the past. We'll continue to work on that, but of course, we'll add some more value to it.
Fine, and I think, sir, we'll anyways send you a small document which we have made, and we would like to draw on your advice as to how we can probably support our government's G20 agenda forward. Ma'am, if you're okay, then I think since sir is in a hurry, we could wrap up the session here.
To hear him. So I think we can call it a close. Dilip, are you there? I'd like you to give the official vote of thanks, please.
Ma'am, I think
He's not there?
he's logged out. Yeah, I
That's
think
fine.
he's there. He's
Even though
there. Yeah, maybe on a call.
he's
So
on the
we
call.
just wrap it here, ma'am.
Well, I will do the honors of officially thanking everyone. Thank you, Peter, for being with us and such a big support. It's always a pleasure to see you and to hear you. Thank you very much, Sureshi. You are a true friend of FICCI. I have to say that. Besides, of course, being a very, very capable and an able parliamentarian, you've added value to every single portfolio that you have held. And we're really happy and proud to have you with us today. Thank you so much for enlightening us. And I think the way forward that you have explained, particularly between the difference between globalization and Atmanirbhar and the misunderstanding that Atmanirbhar should not be seen as an inward looking thing. It's just self reliance, it's not inward looking. So, thank you very much for giving us all your very clear ideas and thoughts. Thank you, participants, all of those who have logged on for this webinar. And thank you for your continued support, because this forum has actually become way more active on the virtual platform than it was while we were physically meeting each other. But nothing can replace a physical meeting. And we do look forward to having a physical meeting with some of our parliamentarians very soon in the near future. Till then, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you very much. All the best to you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. God bless you.